Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to another Genshin Impact video. And I'm a bit late with this one. We're here to talk about Hu Tao. Hu Tao, second rerun, or rather, first rerun, second total banner is now live. She's an amazing character. She's an amazing Pyro spear user. And for those who don't have her and want a very strong, single target, and moderately good AoE Pyro user, then by all means, go grab her, she's super strong. But in this video, I'm actually going to give you reasons why she's strong and reasons why as you would maybe want to get her. Some good synergies, going over her talents, abilities, constellations, all the good stuff, giving suggestions for builds and whatnot. So let's get into it. So as I mentioned before, Hu Tao is a Pyro spear user, which makes her a phenomenal choice because Pyro is probably the strongest element in the game, and spear users have a lot of very good weapons to choose from. But let's take a look at her abilities first. So obviously normal attack is the normal attack, nothing different there. Very normal attack pattern really. Her elemental skill though is a bit on the you really want to understand how it works fundamentally level. And so essentially what happens is Hu Tao will buff herself by turning her normal attack type into pyro damage. She'll drain a certain percentage of her HP, which is going to be 30% of her HP, so she'll lose 30% on every single elemental skill use, but it's not always of your total HP, it's of your current HP. So if you have currently 1000 HP and then you use it, you'll go down to 700, and then if you use it then, it will be 30% of 700, not 1000. So it works off of your current HP. She converts her damage to Pyro, as I said before, and the attack is also increased by 5.96% of your max HP with the elemental skill, which is indicative of her being a HP percent character. The duration of the ability is 8 seconds, or rather the Blood Blossom duration, and the duration of the actual ability, which is the Pyro attack type, is 9 seconds with a 16-second cooldown, which is actually quite a hefty cooldown, so you will have a fair bit of downtime. So she works well with characters that you can switch in and out of, maybe a co-DPS. With the Elemental Burst though, it's pretty much just a one-hit wonder if you've ever had Tartaglia, or if you have characters that have a single hit Elemental Burst, this is pretty much it. The very cool part though is that when you're at lower HP, it will deal more damage. So if you see here, its normal skill damage is 494% at level 10. At low HP though, it goes up to 617, which is a fairly chunky boost there. Also, hitting enemies with the Elemental Burst will heal Hu Tao for a certain percentage per enemy hit. As you can see here, 10.2% of max HP when you hit an enemy. But then when you're at low HP, you gain 13.6 per enemy hit, so you can heal yourself. She's kind of self-sufficient in a sense, if you can really play her well. And cooldown is 15 seconds, so nothing really to worry about there, with an energy cost of 60, so she's in the middle range of energy cost. Pretty good skill and burst so far. Going on to her first talent though, when Parramatta Papilio state activated by Guide to Afterlife, which is her elemental skill, ends, all allies in the party excluding Hu Tao will have their crit rate increased by 12 seconds. This is pretty much boosting that kind of idea that she uses her elemental skill, uses up the full duration, and then switches over to another main DPS because they'll have their crit rate increased. So you can, it's a lot of synergy between other characters that is a key to using her correctly. Going on to a second talent though, when Hu Tao's HP is equal or less to 50%, her pyro damage is increased by 33%. That is the whole kind of playstyle of, because her elemental skill lowers her HP, you kind of want to stay in the 25 to 50% HP range. I usually try to stay at very low HP because I use a Zhongli for my team, but if obviously you don't have a Zhongli, this is going to be a lot harder, but that is the general range because 33% pyro damage is a lot of percent. And then her last talent here, nothing important, but when she cooks a dish, which she can cook every dish, she has an 18% chance to make a suspicious version, which is worse than an original version. So it's kind of like, do you want more food or do you want less better food? It's kind of a weird theory, but it's that's what it does. Moving on to her constellations though, this is where she gains massive power depending on how you want to play her and depending on how much you want to put in terms of money. So Hu Tao by herself, C0, she's phenomenal. By the way, you can get C0 Hu Tao and have an amazing time. I've been using her since her first banner and she's been beautiful. But if you want a fair bit more power boost and a bit more smoothness, C1 is the way to go. C1 pretty much reduces the consumption of stamina to 0 when you charge attack with her, and the meta for her attack style is charge attacking. That is kind of the OP meta. So if you want a fairly big power boost, then C1 is a very good choice. If you go to C2 now, you get increased Blood Blossom damage by an amount equal to 10% of Hu Tao's max HP. And I did actually forget to mention this about her elemental skill, is that when you hit an enemy with a charge attack, you will actually apply a dot to them, symbolized by a flower on the actual enemy floating around them. You will apply that and it will deal periodic damage every so often. And so what Constellation 2 actually does is increases that Blood Blossom damage. It's actually not that important, this one. You would think it's actually quite a hefty damage boost, but it's actually not that amazing because the damage itself is it's periodic. It does damage pretty much when it expires or so. And so I haven't really found it to be that useful, or really I don't think it's useful. It doesn't sound useful, but take that as you will. It is a 10% damage increase in the end. Going on to C4, this is another one of those kind of, she has her own damage time, and then after her damage time is over, she buffs the enemy, or buffs her teammates to deal more damage as well. This is one of those constellations, and upon defeating an enemy affected by Blood Blossom that Hu Tao applied herself, all nearby allies in the party, excluding Hu Tao, will have their crit rate further increased by 12%. So if you combo that with her second talent, or is it her first talent, you will gain pretty much a 25% crit rate boost to allies after Hu Tao's damage period is over, if you can guarantee a kill during her damage period, which is pretty crazy. This is pretty much like a milestone that I'd say. If you can get to C4, then you'll have a really strong Hu Tao, a really strong synergetic Hu Tao. But if you want a bit more power, then obviously C4, or C4 isn't enough. C6 is the answer. C6 is a long one. This is going to be a long read. Triggers when Hu Tao's HP drops below 25%, or when she suffers a lethal strike. I think that used to be 1%. Hu Tao will not fall as a result of the damage sustained. Additionally, for the next 10 seconds, all the elemental and physical resistance is increased by 200%. Her crit rate is increased by 100, and her resistance to interruption is greatly increased. Oh, that was a long read, and this can only occur every 60 seconds. So for those who want a quick summary, this is a second life. Every 60 seconds, Hu Tao cannot die for a bit. She pretty much drops to 25% HP and then becomes moderately immortal with the physical and elemental res increase to 200%. And at the same time, when she drops to 25% HP, her crit rate is increased by 100%. So if you're going for a minute by minute extreme burst damage, then this is the way to go. 100% crit rate, that means that you can funnel just into crit damage, and attack percent and all that stuff, and then you'll just be able to blitz them every single minute if you drop her down to 25% HP. People have said this is not actually that great of a constellation, and I pretty much agree with that. This is a good, this is a good constellation, don't get me wrong, but it's such a situational constellation and such a finicky constellation to execute that it's not really worth investing in. The furthest I can really wholeheartedly suggest is going maybe C2 or C4. That is the real furthest I'd ever suggest. C5 if you want the most raw damage boosting from her constellation. If you want the maximum damage she can ever achieve, then C6 is obviously the answer, but C5 is the most I'd ever recommend. There's no real point in going to C6 if you're just kind of looking to have a character that does damage. Now let's talk weapons. We've assessed her normal kit and everything to do with her fundamentals. Let's talk weapons. Now, I don't have a perfectly made Hu Tao. By no means is my Hu Tao amazing. I'm using the Deathmatch R5, which is a decent weapon. It's pretty good. I'd say it's equal to R1 Homa, maybe just less. But if you're looking for good weapons on her, she's got good options, but you know, they could be better. So obviously Deathmatch works, it's a crit rate weapon, but if you have things like the Staff of Homa, which I sadly did not get. If you do have the Staff of Homa though, that's her best in slot. Things like the Jade Primordial Spear work as well. The Jade Primordial Spear works obviously, the Skyward Spine works pretty much as you'd expect, as just it works on any character. Staff of Homa, again, best in slot for her. And Engulfing Lightning, this one would work if she wasn't such a non-elemental skill reliant character. Obviously you can build her for elemental skill damage, but it's not like her best way to go in any way, shape or form. And that's pretty much the best out of her 5 stars. In terms of her 4 stars, Deathmatch is alright, the catch can be good, Wavebreaker Spin maybe. She doesn't really have that many good weapons, if I'm completely honest, because of the way that she scales with HP percent, and there's not that many HP percent or HP centered spears that boost just elemental skill damage. Things like the Crescent Pike could work, but because of the physical damage bonus that is there, it's kind of counterintuitive of her using her elemental skill, because obviously the ability does boost normal and charge attack damage, but that's a sad thing. But at this point, any 4-star spear works, but she does not have an amazing 4-star spear in my opinion. She really does gain a massive power boost from the Staff of Homa, which is the only HP percent one currently from my knowledge. In terms of artifacts though, this is where she also isn't as customizable as you'd want her to be. So there's not that many artifact sets that really work amazingly on her. Crimson Witch is really the only answer. You could go with Noblesse Oblige, Crimson Witch, that does work. You could go with Emblem of Severed Fate if you really want some elemental burst damage, but again, not that great. And you could go with Forset Gladiator because that will boost polearm damage by just a raw percentage, and that could work really well. But when she uses Crimson Witch 4-set, or maybe even 2-set Crimson, 2-set Wanderer's trope, that does work. But 4-set Crimson Witch is the general census that is amazing for her, getting as much pyro damage bonus because all your hits with her are pyro damage. You really want that to be it. Now, in terms of what you actually want on the artifacts, that is a different question. We're going to start off with the flower. Obviously, HP on this one. You want as much crit damage, obviously, as per usual, but HP is another factor. If you get Crimson Witch artifacts with HP on them, don't be discouraged. If you have a Hu Tao, slap them on her. She'll do great. Now, in terms of specific pieces, there's a few different things going around, and from what I've noticed is that you'd want the timepiece to actually be HP percent. I haven't farmed Crimson Witch since I got Hu Tao's Crimson Witch set to here, so I don't actually have a HP piece as my time, but that is what you'd want as the best in slot. Going on further, you'd want pyro damage bonus on the chalice. That's going to give her the biggest yield of damage. And then for the helmet, I have crit damage piece because I'm using the deathmatch, and pretty much if you have enough crit rate, you can just chuck in a crit damage timepiece, or sorry, crit damage helmet, and you'll be able to get a lot of damage out of her. But it's really this timepiece that you'd want HP percent on, because it's just the thing that I've heard. I haven't tested it myself to see the difference. It's just what I've heard, that the HP on the timepiece will be better than attack percent on the timepiece. Now, jumping back to the talents, what would you want to level up first? If you were looking to really gain as much damage from her as possible, what would you want to ascend, or sorry, max out, crown? What would you want to do first? Now, I've almost triple crowned Hu Tao because she's my favorite character. I like her aesthetic. I like her as a character. Me thing, don't worry about me. Just a little hint. But for me, I'd probably do her elemental skill first, comboed with her normal attack. You'll gain the most value from crowning or even getting those to level 9 first than you would getting her elemental burst up, because this is a lot easier to use and it synergizes with the team more, whilst her elemental burst is a lot more selfish styled and you would not get as much value out of it. So her elemental skill and her normal attack is the best thing to level up to 9 first. Now, if we take a look at some character synergy, as in what characters would work extremely well with Hu Tao, that is pretty consistent. So you have Hu Tao, and I do recommend a shield character with her, or at least a off-field healer, someone like that to really keep her from dying instantly when getting hit by anything. So something like that, Zhongli, or some sort of off-field healer like Barbara would work really well. But what you want to combo her with is characters like Xingqiu. That's pretty obvious, that's been the meta for a long time. But characters like Raiden Shogun work extremely well on hit effects. You've got the Electro Traveler having their elemental burst be an on hit effect. You know, characters like Kaya with their elemental burst just dealing ticking cryo damage off field can work as well. You've also got characters like Beidou, Fischl, they could work really well. Zhangling, even though it is Pyro, it still is off field damage to an extent. Just general off field characters that deal damage through either their elemental skill at the same time that Hu Tao is attacking, or pretty much Xingqiu. That's what I'm going to boil this down to. Just combo her with Xingqiu and then you'll be fine. Doesn't really matter if it's a built Xingqiu. I just kind of get their elemental burst strong. But characters similar to him or exactly like him, even Toma could work well if you just want that double pyro. But that is the general synergy, is you want a shield character or an off-field healer comboed with a character with on-hit effects like Xingqiu, or off-field damage that's elemental, so it can elemental react with Hu Tao's skill. Now, that's pretty much the basics of Hu Tao, and that's pretty much everything covered. That's her best in slot weapons, Staff of Homa, and maybe Deathmatch or some other kind of HP percent 4-star speed. I don't have all of them, I do apologize. In terms of artifacts, it is Crimson Witch. That is the only thing I can really recommend without kind of sabotaging gameplay, because I haven't tried Noblesse Oblige, but I wouldn't kind of think that it's that great, unless you're going for the one-hit wonder build, but that's really a hard thing to execute because you need elemental reactions and all that. So just 4-set Crimson Witch is the best thing to get on her. And then C, in terms of constellations, C1 is the most that I would ever get, I would ever get, but going up to C5 is the furthest I would ever recommend to anyone if they were really invested in the character, because that is the last talent upgrade kind of constellation, and you'd get a massive damage boost from that. But this has been kind of a weird guide. I did it different to the Toma guide because I wanted to see how I would feel talking about it live or editing a lot of the stuff and kind of showing different statistics. So if you enjoyed this one, if you enjoyed this guide, please leave a like, comment, subscribe, do whatever you want really. And then also, yeah, just tell me about if you enjoyed this way or the Toma way, because in the Toma one, I did a lot more editing. But for now, I'm just going to put on some gameplay of my Hu Tao shredding bosses and doing many damages. So hope you guys enjoy that and see what she's made of.